I am obsessed with Pikmin. Since the release of Pikmin 4, my love for Pikmin has only been reignited. I love those silly little fellas. But what exactly is a Pikmin? You see, Pikmin are these animal-plant hybrid creatures that support us on our missions. The first time we meet a Pikmin is in Pikmin 1 when Captain Olimar crashes his ship. With the help of the Pikmin, Captain Olimar is able to retrieve his missing ship parts and make his way home. Interestingly enough, the wild Pikmin Captain Olimar encounters in Pikmin 2 appear to remember him, and so, throughout the series, we are to use Pikmin to help aid us with our endeavors. The Pikmin also come in different shapes and sizes, as there is more than one Pikmin type. This is because different Pikmin are able to adapt and overcome different obstacles, and so I wanted to do a video dedicated to ranking the different Pikmin types from worst to best. While I do enjoy all the different Pikmin types and I'm always open to more, bring back more Bulbmin, I will admit that some can have more disadvantages than others, and because some Pikmin's abilities have changed across the series, I will be focusing solely on their abilities in Pikmin 4. So, for example, in Pikmin 3, the Rock Pikmin are completely immune to being crushed or stabbed by enemies. This is not the case for Pikmin 4. In Pikmin 4, the Rock Pikmin can get crushed on hard surfaces, so I will be judging them based on that, and since we're only looking at Pikmin 4, this means the Bulbmin and Puffmin will be excluded. I will also not be criticizing the Pikmin too heavily against Oatchi, as Oatchi is like this super Pikmin. He has the ability to be immune to all elements, and so it would be a little unfair to dock points against certain Pikmin types because of Oatchi. Instead, I want to emphasize on how the Pikmin types work together with Oatchi and as a team. So for this ranking, I will strongly consider Pikmin based on combat, collecting, and teamwork. And before I forget, what's up Sarah Butts? How are you? I hope you're doing well. If you've also played Pikmin 4, let me know what's your favorite Pikmin, and let's get on with the list. In last place we have the white Pikmin. And the funny thing is, my favorite Pikmin is the white Pikmin. I like their feisty little attitude that Nintendo suggests. I think they're cute, I like their design, I like how tiny they are compared to the rest. Basically, I can go on for days about them, but the problem is, they are very underused in Pikmin 4. They have so much potential, but there wasn't too many enemies or caves that lets us utilize this. Poison is a neat concept that I wish we saw more of in Pikmin 4, like, imagine a cave mixed with poisonous water that you have to traverse. We could definitely have more enemies that are mixed with poison too, as a lot of enemies in Pikmin 4 tend to have one element, so fighting some enemies can get stale, but a combo of elements could really elevate things, and this is made evident by the final boss in Pikmin 4, which really elevates the fight by including the various elemental types. I just wish this concept wasn't always saved for a big boss battle, cause it ends up sweeping the potential of other Pikmin under the rug. Cause of course we're always gonna have a ton of water and fire themed enemies in Pikmin, so even though I rank the white Pikmin as the worst, it doesn't mean I hate them or anything. But the gameplay for Pikmin 4, I feel puts the white Pikmin on the back burner. I just feel like the job of the white Pikmin in this game was to take out the poison mushrooms and call it a day. They also withdrew the treasure finding ability the white Pikmin had in Pikmin 2 and gave it to Oatchi. As I mentioned before, I'm not going to dock points from the Pikmin for Oatchi's immunity, but when you really think about it, he basically took their job. And while I do appreciate their speed, they are also not a strong fighter, and I don't think as many people use them to poison enemies. I know in Pikmin 2 my dad would sacrifice white Pikmins as a strategy, especially against enemies like the Emperor Bullblacks, and so the white Pikmin are basically the Shinobu of the team. There's no denying that they can get the job done, but I think there are more efficient Pikmin out there, so personally I wouldn't have them on my team except to use their speed to transport treasure. Overall, they don't have much going on, which is a shame as I do see so much potential for them to be utilized more in future Pikmin games. Second to last we have the winged Pikmin. Design-wise, I do think they're adorable and I like how they play into the bug aesthetic. However, in Pikmin 4, I barely use them, which is a shame because I did like them in Pikmin 3, and I think this is because in Pikmin 3, the winged Pikmin felt more efficient for transporting goods or using shortcuts. In Pikmin 4, there are a lot of moments where the winged Pikmin will use the same path as the regular Pikmin, which defeats the purpose of using the winged Pikmin, cause if we're gonna use the regular route, then I'd rather use the Pikmin that are more efficient at fighting. So for example, in this Dandori cave, the winged Pikmin are able to lift the ball up towards the ship using a shortcut, right? But then for whatever reason, they don't use the same path with this ball. Instead, they go the long way and do a shortcut much later. But if they're gonna go the regular route for a while, any Pikmin would be fine then. What's the point to using the wing? So this inconsistency is what bothers me. I don't want to play guessing games with my Pikmin. And here's another thing, the wing Pikmin are not as strong as the other Pikmin, and even when going against other enemy airborne critters, there's not much of an advantage. Sure, your Pikmin are less likely to miss because you don't have to worry about throwing them, but it's really not that big of a difference, especially when you have the yellow Pikmin who can also defeat such enemies with you, because the yellow Pikmin are also meant to help with out-of-reach objects and enemies. They were the original, and at a faster pace since the average Pikmin does more damage. I think it was a missed opportunity for the wing Pikmin to not have a damage buff against other flying enemies, because I wouldn't use the wing Pikmin for combat against land enemies either. And even then, there's not many flying enemies and most are just annoying, for example the Blowhog family. While it's a good idea to get rid of them, you can also skim past them most of the time and other Pikmin will do the job just fine. As a result, I don't see the wing Pikmin as a necessity for my team. Just like the white Pikmin, they definitely have potential, but Pikmin 4 was not their game. Nintendo may treat them like the butt of the joke, but there's no denying how useful this Pikmin is. Next up, we have the blue Pikmin. It's not a Pikmin game without an area that is heavily based in water, but other than that, the blue Pikmin doesn't have much of an advantage. They don't have any damage buffs, but they definitely do more damage than a winged or white Pikmin. They also have an average speed, so not too many cons, not too many pros. They are the most effective for water, but once that's out of the way, they are not a necessity. And even with the existence of Ochi, Ochi is not able to completely replace the blue Pikmin's abilities in water, as Ochi has the inability to fight enemies underwater. Only the blue Pikmin can handle that. Overall, the blue Pikmin aren't bad to have on your team, but when dealing with objectives that focus on land, I think you can opt for other Pikmin to do the job. Following the blue Pikmin, we have the yellow Pikmin. Before we had the wing Pikmin, the yellow Pikmin was the only way for us to get out of reach treasures and efficiently fight airborne enemies, which they still can be used for even now. While they don't have a damage buff, they are definitely stronger than the wing Pikmin, and so I always opted to use them. The yellow Pikmin are also the best at digging things up, although some of their abilities do suffer because of Ochi, at least later in the game. In the beginning, it's best to use the yellow Pikmin for digging, but once Ochi is fully upgraded, his speed for digging up treasure is a lot faster than them. Because of this, it's wise to use Ochi if you have this skill fully upgraded, and some items that are out of reach can also be knocked down by Ochi, so you don't always need the yellow Pikmin for it. But I'm not going to dock points off of them because of this, as sometimes an item won't budge no matter what, and that's why the yellow or wing Pikmin are still an essential. They also have an immunity to electricity, which can instantly kill other Pikmin, unlike fire and water hazards. For fire and water hazards, you have an opportunity to recover your Pikmin by whistling at them. Electricity, though, is not as forgiving. Next up, we have the rock Pikmin. Just like the wing Pikmin, I really enjoyed using the rock Pikmin in Pikmin 3, but in Pikmin 4, I found myself not using them as much as before. And I think this is because in Pikmin 4, the rock Pikmin lost their immunity to being crushed. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the rock Pikmin can get crushed on hard surfaces, but they are safe from being crushed on soft surfaces. Luckily, they still kept their immunity from being stabbed, and so the rock Pikmin has an excellent defense system compared to the rest. They are also the only Pikmin that has the ability to break crystal walls. Ochi cannot do this, even when fully upgraded. But the main reason why I ranked rock Pikmin lower is because of how they attack. While their rock shell makes a great defense for specific enemies, their fighting style leaves them vulnerable for a brief period. This is because the rock Pikmin does not latch onto enemies when attacking. Instead, after being thrown, the rock Pikmin will roll backwards, get up, and do it again. As a result, the rock Pikmin can end up doing less damage over time, as opposed to a Pikmin that stays latched on while attacking their enemy. And because the rock Pikmin rolls backwards after being initially thrown, the enemy has a chance to eat them. The rock Pikmin also have a chance of missing their attack, and sometimes when they are squished into the ground, they will stay there until you treat them with a whistle. So sometimes you cannot rely on rock Pikmin themselves to just fight. It is better to recollect them with a whistle and rethrow them. So even though rock Pikmin does good damage, they still have an amount of cons. Last but not least, for the original trio, we have the red Pikmin, and I think the red Pikmin is a solid all-arounder. And there's a reason why every Pikmin game has us open up with the red Pikmin. Even in Captain Oliver's Shipwreck Tale, we start with the red. There is no rock, wing, purple, or whatever. The basics are an essential. And for every Pikmin game I've played, the red Pikmin without a doubt were always one of the Pikmin I'd have on the field. And I know that some people would argue that rock Pikmin is stronger than the red because of the initial damage buff they get when thrown and their immunity to being stabbed. And I do agree with this to an extent. It's exactly why I preferred them in Pikmin 3. But in Pikmin 4, I think the red Pikmin are far better. The rock Pikmin has no damage buff when you use them to swarm an enemy. If you want to swarm enemies, it's wiser to use the red, who will latch on when attacking. The red Pikmin also do more damage than over half the Pikmin types and are immune to fire, which is one of the elements that Pikmin utilizes a lot. There's a lot of fire-related enemies and hazards through the Pikmin games, and in Pikmin 4, they make use of the red's immunity to fire by letting them transport lit pine cones to different pits. I think this was an upgrade from the usual fiery geysers we've seen in the past Pikmin games. In the past, there would be fiery traps that the red Pikmin would have to destroy for other Pikmin to safely traverse. In Pikmin 4, it seems they replaced this with haystacks that you need to light on fire with the help of a Pikmin tossing a lit pine cone. Although, I kinda wish they kept some of the old traps and didn't discard it completely. Nonetheless, the red Pikmin are your average warrior class, and not much can go wrong with having them on your team. This Pikmin type was introduced for the first time in Pikmin 4, and it's the Ice Pikmin. You actually unlock this Pikmin type early in game as it can be found in Area 1, and it makes an excellent team with the red as they both balance each other out with their pros and cons. For instance, the Ice Pikmin is not strong at combat. It doesn't do as much damage as the regular Pikmin. However, they do have the ability to freeze their enemies once the enemy's freeze gauge is filled. This ability is similar to the Ultra Spicy Spray from Pikmin 2, but sadly not instantaneous. The enemies also don't remain frozen forever. If not defeated in time, the enemies will break out of the ice and shake any Pikmin that were latched on off. Enemies once frozen also take on less damage. Because of this, it's a good idea to have other Pikmin that do more damage like the red or purple accompany the ice in combat. Time is of the essence. I wouldn't rely on the Ice Pikmin alone for fighting. The Ice Pikmin are also weaker to fire than any other Pikmin type. They can perish from fire a lot faster than the rest. But on the bright side, the Ice Pikmin can grapple with ice enemies without freezing. And if they freeze an airborne enemy in midair, the enemy will shatter to their death. A drawback though is that enemies defeated while frozen will not bring back a body, but they can drop nectar to heal Ochi or spray for your Pikmin. This is a problem though because in some Dandori levels, if you want to get all the points from collecting enemies and treasure, you need to make sure they don't defeat enemies while frozen. Overall, the Ice Pikmin are incredibly useful and can also freeze bodies of water to help your team safely traverse. This can also create shortcuts for Pikmin to transport goods a lot more efficiently. While I wouldn't rely on the Ice Pikmin alone, when paired up with other Pikmin types, they are definitely a force to be reckoned with. And for the best Pikmin to have on your team, I would say it's the purple Pikmin. Now I know that some would argue that the purple Pikmin is just brute force because they're not immune to any of the elements, but they make an excellent addition to your team and can't go wrong combined with any Pikmin. For example, I like to pair the purple Pikmin with the ice or red for further damage. They can also lift 10 times more than the other Pikmin and weight the heaviest. Because of their weight, they are wind resistant and can't be knocked down by windy attacks from enemies. For example, the blowhogs. They also have the ability to escape bubbles faster, and on the bright side, when they are thrown, they will land a ground pound attack, which temporarily stuns enemies and can injure nearby beasts. This can be useful against a swarm of enemies such as the dwarf bulborbs, and while they have disadvantages such as their slow speed, it's not much of a problem as before due to Ochi. Ochi's ability to carry your team on his back makes it very easy to keep your Pikmin group together and not worried about losing any. But if you're trying to get a speedy score in Dandori, then the purple Pikmin may slow you down. For combat though, purple Pikmin has your back, especially when going against a water wrath. But wait, there's one more type. How can the purple Pikmin be the best? Well, that's because I realized in the making of this list that maybe it would be unfair to compare the glow Pikmin with the rest. The glow Pikmin are only available during night expeditions and their job is to help defend the luminous for glow sap, not transport treasure. or help us with day expeditions. And since we can only rely on them and no other Pikmin type, it makes sense that the glow Pikmin are immune to all elements. That way we can safely traverse without worrying about elemental hazards and face various enemies, so they're meant to have an elemental advantage above the rest. But they still can take physical damage, and while they don't have a damage buff, they do have a special ability of their own. Similar to Ochi, the glow Pikmin have their own special charge, which is called the Glow Mob, and this charge also temporarily stuns all surrounding enemies. It is not exclusive to just one, so basically, the bigger the team, the better the swarm. Although every night expedition you start out with a small team of glow Pikmin, and so you constantly have to collect glowing rocks to grow your team. You also cannot command them to do Glow Mob if you're playing as Ochi. This is probably because the controls for these commands are the same. And while we can use glow Pikmin for caves, it's not really worth it, as getting their seeds is not as quick compared to the others. They don't have an onion that follows us, and they don't grow from pellet seeds nor enemies. And you can always rewind time if a Pikmin dies. As a result, I've never used a glow Pikmin outside of the night expeditions. However, they are a good all-arounder to have on your team, and so I understand why you can rely on just them for night expeditions. Hopefully they expand on this further in future Pikmin games, as I felt like the night missions get stale after a while. But I'll go further into detail about that in another video. Overall, I see the glow Pikmin as this runner-up. Its special move I think is more efficient than the purple Pikmin's ground pound or the initial damage buff rock Pikmin get when initially thrown, but it would be incredibly overpowered if we could use the glow Pikmin during our day expeditions. And that's why I think it would be unfair to compare the glow Pikmin with the rest, as they were created to be the most efficient Pikmin for night expeditions, which has different objectives than the day expeditions. Instead, the glow Pikmin makes the perfect replacement for the Bulbmin in caves. In Pikmin 2, the purpose of the Bulbmin was to help replace any Pikmin that was lost for your team during a cave expedition. They couldn't follow you to the surface, similar to the glow Pikmin unable to accompany us during the day. Technically, there's no wrong way of playing Pikmin. I think we can all agree that every Pikmin is great in their own way. Whether you like using this type or you prefer this, it's all Pikmin at the end of the day. And my list is definitely just my opinion. Also, just because a Pikmin type was ranked lower than the rest doesn't mean I like that Pikmin any less. With that said, if you'd like to see more Pikmin content from me, remember to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments below. I was thinking of doing more ranking videos for Pikmin, for example ranking Pikmin from worst to best for Dandori, or ranking every enemy for Pikmin 4, the list goes on. But yeah, this is Little Lemon Drop dropping out. See ya, bye bye, have a good day.